Hey guys, today we're going to be playing around with an API for different breweries. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to give us information about breweries all over the world. So let's take a look at one of these endpoints. If we look at the data that's being output here, we get an ID number, we get a name, Almanac, a beer company, a brewery type, which is going to be micro, a street address, a city, a state, we get a country that it's in, a phone number, a website, all this good stuff. And the way that we get this information is by interacting with the API. So this API is giving us the information from endpoints. So an endpoint is going to be like a URL. So right here we see https api.openbrewerydb.org/breweries. So if we were to just plug this URL into our browser, we notice that we get all this information back for a handful of breweries. We get the Goose Island in Philadelphia, we get the Ironbark Brewery, we get Mallory Brewing, so on and so forth. So we can get this same information in code by basically calling this URL, this website address. So let's do that. Very simply, the easiest way, in my opinion, to do a request in Python is to use the requests library. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to import requests. And then we're going to set our URL equal to that URL that we just visited. And we'll say print requests.get URL. And this is going to give us back a response object that's going to tell us a status code of 200. And 200 is great. That means that we've hit the endpoint exists, and it acknowledges that we've tried to contact it. So what about that information that we were just seeing though? Well, if we look at it, this is what we call JSON data. And JSON is how most applications communicate data to and from each other between servers nowadays, because it's a very effective way of doing it. Just a quick description: JSON is an open standard file format and data interchange format that uses human readable text to store and transmit data objects consisting of attribute value pairs and arrays. Very common. This is what I've used in every single job where I've ever dealt with data. So what we're going to do is we can just do the request library is great. We can just do .json on the end of this, and this is going to give us back all of this data. Now, at first glance, this is basically a block of text. So we can make this easier for us to read, or maybe we can parse through this and we can say, well, we only care about certain parts of the information that we're getting back. So let's see here. Let's get a name. So if we look at, like name, this one is called, I don't know how to say it, BNAF LLC. So we could do JSON, and then we could, at the end of this, get the name, and we'll see what's going wrong here. List indices must be, because I'll show you what I did wrong. Because this is a list of objects, and you can't get a name of the list. You need a name of an individual object. So let me make this a little easier to understand. Instead of printing out this whole thing, let's say for brewery in request.getURL JSON print brewery, and we'll see now we get these individual objects. There's an object, there's an object. Each one of these has their own unique ID, 14677, 12773. So instead of printing the whole object, let's just print the name like we were trying to do. Okay, cool. Yeah, and there's that one we're looking at: BNAF LLC, Boulder Beer Co., Ironbark Brewery, Ska Brewing. Cool. So let's do this. We have 4 endpoints here. I've already played around with this. Only the first 3 are ones that we're actually going to care about. And in case you were wondering, how did we find this API? I literally just went on Google. I looked up beer API, and it was the second link that came up, Open Brewery DB. So let's make functions for these 3 endpoints. So we have list, get, and search. So we have list breweries. We'll just do a pass there to start. We have get brewery, do another pass, and define search breweries, and another pass. Okay, cool. So let's call this API URL. Okay. We already know that this first one for list breweries, all we have to do, we'll do this one more time. We'll assign this to a variable called R, but it's still just going to be that same thing, request.get API URL. And then we're going to print, well, I guess we're going to want to loop through it like we did before. So for brewery in r.json, print brewery name. All right. And when we run that, we don't get anything because we've defined the function, but we need to call the function. There we go. All the same stuff we got before. Okay. So let's comment that out. Let's do, actually, I think there's one more thing we can do with this. There's a couple things we can do with this. We can search by city. We can search by latitude and longitude. We can search by name, by state, by postal. So we're just going to do one. We're just going to search by city. And we see that the way we do this is we take that breweries endpoint that we had before, and now we're going to throw a question mark by city equals city name. Okay. Let's do this then. Because we know we don't have to put a city in to do to get a list here, we're going to make city an optional parameter. And how we do that is we put in a city just like we normally would, but then we say city equals none, and this gives it a default value of none. So if we don't enter anything for city, then it automatically equals none. Now, if somebody does does input a city, we'll say if city URL equals, well, I guess it would be API URL equals, right? Breweries, and we want to put in that by city equals, and we also want to put in city. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, this happened to me earlier when I was playing around with this too. For some reason, I have to create a new URL variable. Whoop, didn't mean to save. Okay, so we're going to replace that with URL. Okay, trying it again now. All right, it works, and let's do, I live in Texas, so let's do Dallas. Yep, and there we go. Like Old Dallas Brewery, so we're getting Dallas stuff here. Let's do Philadelphia because they're football rivals, and I'm a Philly boy myself. Philadelphia Brewing Co., Fishtown Brewing Co. I used to live in Fishtown, or outside of Fishtown, I should say. Technically it was Kensington. Don't tell my mom. Okay. So okay. So now we can put an optional city parameter into here. Let's do get brewery. So coming over to the documentation for get brewery, this looks like a lot less documentation. This is that same endpoint breweries, but now we are doing / and then an ID number. So that 5494 we see matching up with that ID right there, that 5494. So let's see if we do 5494. So R equals, we're just going to do a get request again. So API URL, and we're going to add /ID. An ID, we're going to make an input for the function. So then we can do the same thing. We can do print r.json, but because get brewery is only going to return one brewery, we're not going to have to loop through it because it's not a list. It's just one object. So this time we can just directly say r.json name. And something we're going to have to do is we're going to want to make sure that ID is a string so that we can put it into our URL like this. So let's do get brewery ID, and this was 5494. So if we're getting the name, we should expect Mad Tree Brewing to come back. Okay, 5494, key error name. What did I do wrong? Let's just try printing r.json. Couldn't find brewery with ID 5494. Did we do that right? 5494 breweries. Let's check what our URL is. So instead of printing r.json, let's print API URL. Breweries. Oh, well, look at, well, that, sorry, I should do r.url is what I should do. Breweries 5494. This looks the same as what they had in the documentation, doesn't it? So we'll just copy that there and then copy this on top of it, see if it looks different at all. That looks the same to me. Okay, so let's just try a different ID then. If we come over here, so for Philadelphia, instead of getting the name, let's get the ID. So 10,600. Okay, and now we've stolen an ID from there. Let's plug it in here. Oh, whoops, we're still printing the URL. r.json, and we want to get the name. All right, okay. So for some reason, the ID that they had in the documentation just didn't actually exist. I don't know why that was. But if we put in a different ID, we see we get fermentary form. And let's see if we just put in a random number. Yeah, 10,800, 4-day, right, brewing. So we know that we can get individual objects now. And maybe instead of the name, maybe we want the street, 11671 Lantern Road, or maybe we want the phone number, 317-343-0200. Cool, but we're going to stick with the name for now, just for simplicity. All right, in the last one, we're going to do search breweries. So let's look at the documentation for that. For the query parameter, you can use underscore. Okay, so what they're doing here is their endpoint now says /search query equals dog. Okay, so let's add this on here. We'll say r equal requests dot get API URL plus /search query equals, and then plus a query, which will be an input for this function. All right, and then we're going to want to do, so this is a search. This is going to return a list of objects. So we're going to want to loop through this again. We're going to want to say for brewery in r.json print brewery name. Okay, so then let's search breweries. And the example they have here is dog. So let's just do that. Let's search dog. See what comes up. Request is not defined. Oh, requests with an S. Yeah, look at that. We get bog. Interesting. So the search here actually is, even though we type dog, we're getting very similar search results to dog. That's a pretty cool search in my opinion. But we also get Sea Dog Brewing. We get Sea Dog Brewing Clearwater, Little Dog Brewing, Dog Rose, Bike Dog. So all of these dog result. And again, we can do the same things we did before. If we don't want the name, maybe we want the ID. We can get the IDs. Instead of the IDs, maybe we want the country. Let's see if we have any non-United States ones here. Nope, all United States. But this is just general stuff with playing. Oh, look at this. This one is none. So that one, it was missing information for the street. And if you guys want to play around with this, I very much so encourage you to, if you need a project, a personal project to show off to people, using somebody else's API and building something out of it is a great idea. Put it up on your GitHub, make a website out of it. This is a great place to start your own unique beginner project. So maybe you want to pick a different API. Maybe you want to do I don't know. Let's like books. I'm sure there's something like if I look up books API. Let's see. Google Books APIs. I'm not sure if this is one. It's not as clear as the beer one was. Open Library Books API. But you're seeing how easy it is to find this kind of stuff. I don't know if the documentation is necessarily going to be as clean as it was for the beer API one. But if you're interested in making your own project, I highly recommend doing something with an API. Lots of free information out there. And if you enjoyed this video, if you learned anything, please shoot me a like, a subscription, drop any comments, any questions down in the bottom below, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.